This is Rugby Unity. I am David Pembroke, and joining me is Eddie Jones. Ewan Mackenzie will be a little late for today's program, but Eddie Jones, 41 points to 10, Ireland over Japan. The scoreboard a little unkind, perhaps, to Japan, but certainly you seem to be winning a lot of good reviews on the way the Japanese team is playing.
Yeah, last 15 minutes we conceded 19 points, which was disappointing. But, yeah, we've got to look at the positives. We played some good rugby, but we missed, 5 opportunities to score, which is not good enough if we want to be a top team in the world. So there's plenty to work on. And we've got to pick ourselves up for Wales this week.
How has the team reacted to, the losses, and how would you compare the way they reacted against Australia to the way they reacted against South Africa to the way they reacted against Ireland?
What do you mean by reacted?
Oh, just how they've coped with those losses, how they, was it a different reaction, post-Australia to post-South Africa? Was it a different reaction this weekend to what you saw the previous weekend against South Africa?
I think it's always difficult to assess that. Yeah, because it's more individual. A guy like Michael Leach, after every game that we don't win, he hurts a lot. And, he carries that defeat for a while. I don't think there's a general mood to the team. It's more individual. The younger guys tend to move on a lot more quickly, and particularly those guys who haven't been involved in Test rugby. And if you look at the tour we've embarked on or in the middle of, it's harder than a World Cup. We've had Australia at home, 2-day preparation against South Africa in London, and then on the island in Dublin. So it's a testing old tour. We're learning a lot about the players, learning a lot about what we need to do going forward. And we just got to keep learning.
What would be some of those things that you've picked up that you have learnt over the last couple of weeks? What would be one or two things that you've learnt?
The major thing, not so much the South African game, but the Ireland game is, Test match rugby is about consistency. It's about consistency of effort and execution. And we saw the Ireland side, a younger side, Irish side, play against New Zealand. And up until the 60-minute mark, they were competing really well. And at times might have had the run of the game, but the last 20 minutes, for whatever reason, New Zealand ran away with the game. And we had a similar experience against Ireland this week, 65 minutes, it's 22-10. We miss a couple of opportunities to score. And we drop away. And, for us, and I think maybe similar to Ireland, every team's different, but players get disappointed when they put in effort and they don't get the results. And then something goes against them. They can get emotionally disappointed. They can get frustrated. And frustration is probably one of the worst emotions you can have in rugby, where then you're unable to play the moment. You become more individual because you worry about yourself more than the team. And that's what we saw in the last 15 minutes of the game. So, we've tried to talk about that a couple of times today, try to get the players to understand it when they're in that state, what they can do to change. And again, there's a lot of individual stuff there that needs to be done. But, there's a team aspect of identifying that situation and trying to stay in the moment for longer. Because you stay in the fight, 22-10, if we score a 7-point try and go 22-17 with 15 to go, then the pressure goes on Ireland and it's a different psychological context to the game. So we just got to understand that. And that'd be the main thing we've learned. Secondly, there's little tactical battles we're losing. Our scrum again's been going pretty well. But against Ireland, they outsmarted us and we couldn't react quickly enough on the field to deal with it. And the little nuances of how strong the bind is or what the balance is in that situation. We adjusted really slowly to, and again, is that a factor of experience? It probably is. And we need the players to learn from those experiences and learn quickly, because, there comes a time when if you're not winning, changes happen to the team, not only in personnel, but coaching.
Yeah, but to me, having watched Japan pretty closely through this year, through the Pacific Nations Cup, through these matches at the end of the year, you can see the improvement coming, can't you? You can see that improvement around some of the decision-making. And, there are those frustrating moments. But to me, you can see that learning happening and you can see the improvement each week for the side. So I'm sure that's giving you some encouragement that the team is heading in the right direction.
Yeah, well, I'm not losing any encouragement. But there's noise. There's obviously always noise when you lose around the place. And I had a discussion with one of the young players early in the week. He didn't play well against South Africa. And he said, ultimately we got to the stage where he said to me, all he was thinking about in the game was all those people who talk about him say he's not good enough to play.
Yeah.
So we had a discussion about that, a really good discussion. He came out and was one of our best players against Wales. So our players are going through all of those little difficult learning periods, and we'll come out of it a lot stronger and a lot better team. But as I said, it's not within that we're losing encouragement. It's the noise that comes from the outside, and you've got to be able to deal with that, not only on the individual basis, but also on a team basis.
It's one of the fascinating and enjoyable parts of coaching, and isn't it, as being part of a team, is finding those incremental improvements, finding which are which knobs to turn, which buttons to press in such a way that you can build that consistency over time, because you very rarely see large jumps, do you? It's sort of always incremental, and some weeks you go forward in some areas, some weeks you go back, but it's trying to maintain that coherence and that cohesion and balancing the off-field with the on-field. And it's why, I'm sure it's why you do the job, because it's so fascinating, the task of trying to bring people together to perform at the highest level, because rugby is such a complex sport.
Yeah, I always use the analogy, it's like driving an old car, mate. Remember when you had your first car, the Datsun 1600, red one? Right, they don't even make Datsuns anymore. Your whole job was to keep the car going. And you know that things were going to break down, the handbrake would go, the winker would go, the backlight would go, but you just had to keep it going. And all of a sudden you think you got it going well, and something else happens, the tyres bald or something like that. And, against South Africa, our scrum was pretty good and our line-out was poor. This week our line-out was good and our scrum was poor. So they're the sort of things we're going through all the time.
No, it's great fun. It's great fun, and I look forward to, and we will talk about it later in the week. There obviously is the match against Wales, then the match against Georgia, but that's looking forward. It's time for us to look back and perhaps to discuss a team which is at the other end of the scale, the South African side, 32 points to 17 winners over France. Enormously gifted, capable team that were able to do the job against France, one of the best teams in the world, with 14 men in the second half, to be able to show their adaptability, to be able to move players into different positions, but to, in fact, improve as they went through the game. What was your assessment, having played against South Africa the week before, to see them perform as they did against France in a convincing win, 32 points to 17?
Well, they scored 32 against France with 14 men. So it puts in a bit of a context our game where they scored 60 with 15 and playing at home. Because they consider London the home game for them. And it was a home crowd. And playing against France at Stade de France is a pretty intimidating atmosphere, but not for the South Africans. I thought just the whole game was, you talk about sport. The setup of the game, the arena at the start, the introduction of the two teams, It was just all was built up to be a heavyweight showdown, and that's what it was. And France early, looked really good. Ramos at 15 was massively influential. You can see, his speed in not only his movement but his decision making was absolutely first class. And they looked like a good team. And then the yellow red card happens, which, the guy's 6'8", and he must have been, when he hit him, I reckon, maybe 3.5 foot above the ground. I know there's head contact, and I know we have to worry about the safety, but I just can't see how that's a red card. He's trying to do everything right. Everything right.
Yeah, but the positioning was.
Now, I think it spoils the game.
Yeah, but don't you think it was careless, the way that he set up, the way that he tucked his shoulder?
No, not at all, mate. Not at all. He's trying to make a tackle with a bloke ducking. That's not careless. One thing you see in the game now, you see very few careless acts. Very few. And there's a lot of accidental head contacts, and that was accidental. Why would he try to ram his head in the other player's head? That's just ridiculous. And I thought it was a ridiculous refereeing, ridiculous decision, and it spoiled the game.
Yeah. All right. Well, I don't know. I don't know if I agree with you about that. I think the way that the laws are, the way that they were able to, they have to adjudicate to the laws, and I think they looked at it thoroughly, and they have to,
No, they don't. They interpret the laws.
Well, interpret the laws. Sure.
Referees.
But I thought the way Angus Gardner managed the game was very good, and I thought that part of it, he just went through it. He called upon his assistant referees as they all looked through it, and they worked through it, and they came to a decision. And clearly, they made the decision that they did. You don't agree. You don't think it was the right decision. I actually thought that perhaps it was the right decision. But yeah, certainly it does compromise and impact the game. But perhaps leaving that to one side, but talking about the performance of the South Africans, because again, for me, the way that they're able to mix and match their players, so that takes place, and they've got Rassie Erasmus then has to make some decisions, and so Khaleesi goes to the bench. They then bring Nort on into the lock, Esterhausen off the bench into the flanker position. Feinberg and Gomzulu goes from 10 to 15. Marnie Libok comes onto the field. It's a wonderful resource to be able to have, and a flexibility of capability of that standard, isn't it? To be able to essentially reorganise your team in such a way that you don't miss a beat, so to speak, in the second half, as they sort of lifted up their capability to continue forward through the game, having had the loss of Lou Jaga.
Yeah, I think that was one of the general trends on the weekend in all the games, was the power of the bench, the power of your finishers, how much influence they can have in the game. And having players that can play, we've spoken about before, having, particularly now, being able to cover multiple positions is such a gift for a coach. It's such a gift for a team to have. For instance, our game on the weekend, we collect these stats called samurai stats, which are basically stats of effective actions versus ineffective actions. And all our 8 finishers got well beaten by their 8 Irish counterparts, and hence the 19-0 in the last 15 minutes of the game. And, your ability to build depth in a squad, which South Africa have, probably better than anyone at the moment, allows them to have that flexibility and allows them to finish games really strongly. Yeah, and it's a real credit.
How do you go about coaching that, though, and understanding? Do you go in thinking to yourself, okay, this is how I'm going to get these people in these different positions, and through training during the week, are you sort of bringing people on and bringing people off and simulating, yellow cards, red cards, and how the team might move around, although it is hard to obviously anticipate who may not be there. But is that the part of your preparation and part of your coaching, where you're looking to try to go through various match day scenarios that you may have to face on the weekend?
Well, you can't do everything, but you try to cover. You try to cover a number of scenarios that might happen, and particularly in the set piece and the line out is one where we'll do a number of different scenarios. But as a team, we'll have one or two for the week that we'll try to cover.
Yeah. No, well, to me, I think that's one of the great strengths of the South African team at the moment, that they do seem to be so able and so to be able to be, move different players and not miss a beat. And everybody knows their role. Everyone knows what they need to do. And they're in a position to continue to perform at the highest level. And as you say, a real heavyweight contest. Another heavyweight contest, perhaps not quite as heavyweight, but the All Blacks 25 points to 17 winners over Scotland. What was your assessment of that particular match?
Look, I haven't had a chance to look at that game. There was too much going on. It was interesting. We had a function after the game, which is a rarity these days. To have a function with the opposition. So we went upstairs to the second floor of Aviva Stadium, and both the teams had about 45 minutes together. The chairmans gave their speeches and the captain gave both the captains gave speeches. So we were tied up in that for that period of time. And they had, at that time, you talk about depth, wanting to create depth. Ireland A team was playing against Spain, and they had that on live in the background instead of New Zealand and Scotland. And every team's trying to find a way to increase their depth at the moment, because whilst the point you make about South Africa is 100% right, you can only do that when you've got the depth of players and the quality of players to be able to do that. And that's something they've got, and every other team, every other country's aspiring to build that up. And Ireland's gone starting to drive a big A campaign as New Zealand have, as England have, as they all see the need to create that depth in your squad, of being able to have players who are good enough to play, at the same level as the starting guy, or if not at a higher level than the starting guy in some cases. But to do that, you have to have, you used to have 3 in each position. Now you probably need 5 in each position.
So interesting. That's a bit of old school, isn't it? The post-match function where you go upstairs and you do get the opportunity to mix with the opposition team. Is this a one-off, or is this something that is being reintroduced into other matches, or was this just initiative of the Irish Rugby Union?
It was the initiative of the Irish Rugby Union. We've got one again with Wales this week. So the suit sponsors are happy, because the first time I think we wore suits for 2 years. So they're happy. They all had to get a photo taken to show the suit sponsor were really wearing the suits. So they were happy the suit sponsor. I think it was, in the old days, I remember Ireland, first coaching England, you had to take your black suit to that game because it was a black suit dinner. And, you'd sit around for 2.5 hours. The speeches would go for 2 hours. And some nights would be good fun with the opposition. But I think players grew a bit tired of that consistently happening. But I think now the odd function and, a short function, particularly for the younger generations, I think's a great thing to have for rugby.
Look, to me, my heart swells, with news of that, because I do think these are the types of rituals that rugby needs to hold on to. And you don't need a black tie 3.5 hour dinner. That's, but to be able to spend some time together with the opposition, with your counterpart, so is it, you can build that friendship. And as you say, the opportunity to have speeches, to show respect, to learn about each other, to learn about each other's cultures. Again, it's one of the things that rugby can have that differentiates us from other sports. And I'm pleased to hear that you're doing it 2 weeks in a row, and I hope it catches on. But again, I do understand from a player's point of view that recovery is important and those other things. But the balance of the two, I think, is very important. But yeah, All Blacks, for mine anyway, never in doubt. I thought their back row performed pretty strongly. Lester Fainuku in the centre played well, missed a few tackles. They had a few troubles with the high ball at the back. Their back three weren't particularly effective, and it's still not quite that smooth running All Black machine, but certainly good enough to take on Scotland and to beat them pretty comprehensively at the weekend. The other match, particularly for those of you who follow the Wallabies, Italy 26, Australia 19. Was that a match that you were able to take in, Eddie Jones?
Yeah, no, watch that game, watch it quite closely. It was an impressive game of rugby. I thought the intensity at the contest was really high from both teams, and Italy particularly have improved enormously in that area. They've changed their game a lot under Quiseta, I think his name, the coach there. They play a higher kicking game now. When they do get the ball, they're quite adventurous in the way they play, and they've got two big, strong running centres that help playing like that, who are able to dent the line and then stay on their feet to give time for their support players to get there. But it was a really good contest around the breakdown. There were some unusual decisions in that game too. The Australian third try, I don't know how that was awarded a try, because it looked like very clearly the Italian player tried to strip and he loosened the ball. But he didn't have his contact with the ball when the ball was lost. So I can't see how that's interpreted as a strip. I've always been an admirer of Ben O'Keefe, and I think he's a pretty good referee, but it seemed like that was just a wrong decision.
Your thoughts on, from a positive point of view for Australia, because clearly the result was very disappointing, but Carter Gordon back in rugby. He's a big lump of a lad, isn't he? He's a big boy.
Yeah, it was a tough old day for him, mate. He is a big kid, and he is a very, very talented player. But I thought that was a really hard task for him. Play his first game back in rugby against Italy in Udinese. And the atmosphere there seemed quite electric. It's a beautiful stadium there, lovely part of Italy. But, I thought that was a tough ask for him to play that game. And maybe he'll come out of that with some confidence. But certainly I think the Italians targeted him, and he found it quite difficult going.
We're not talking rugby, we're building it. Rugby Unity.
So we have a question come in from one of our subscribers on Substack, Zachary Burkholtz, and he says, "Gentlemen, love the program, listen every week. And clearly an Australian fan, it's becoming so hard to stay positive when we started the year fairly well, however, have been on the decline in the last month. Could you shed some light into our ever-predictable narrow and box kick attack and our passive defensive pattern? Against Italy, 5 kicks out on the full is not really international standard, and endless penalties given away, especially by our captain. Why are we continuing with the same structures when we are not getting pay from them?" Eddie Jones, what is your answer to Zachary's question?
Well, I think, I don't have an answer. So we could end it there, but I'll give an opinion, which probably I have. I think we call it small pitch rugby is what, whatever definition you want to put on it, but you try to make the pitch small to make it big. So the key is you're trying to compress the defence line, play through them. Australia's got pretty strong ball runners, and then when you've tightened the defence up, then you want to swing with generally your backs to that open side now, and you've got big spaces to attack, really big spaces to attack. And I think we made the point before, when James O'Connor was playing 10, his decision-making was absolutely outstanding on when to swing. and he also had the ability to really look for the second touch. Since he's not played, and I saw him he was in the studio commentating on the game. So obviously he was enjoying that because he's probably getting paid, and he's getting paid by Leicester, so he'd be enjoying that. But they just seem to lack that decision making now, and so what you see then is when the defence has been compressed, they're not swinging with the numbers. And I think, if you look over the last 3 or 4 tests, the bloke who's probably not been at anywhere near his best has been Sawali, who, I think he's missed having Iketau there because Pasami's quite a similar sort of hard-running straight centre. So they've lacked that little bit of deception that Iketau brings. And with James O'Connor's decision-making not there, that's why their attack seems to be quite sterile at the moment. But, I'll just wait and see when Iketau comes back, and if O'Connor plays in the next test, whether they can get back that little bit of fluency in their attack. In terms of the defence penalties, well, it's very rarely discipline. It's the pressure the opposition put on you. But it also goes back to the fact about what I was speaking before about that emotional part, where players can get frustrated, they're not in the game enough, and they try to get in the game. They just overdo a little bit of the breakdown, and they get penalised, and they think, shit, I've got to do something again, and that can lead to double penalties.
Yeah. Okay, all right. Well, there you go. So that's the results of Italy 26, Australia 19, and Australia heads to Dublin this weekend for a very important match. Now, we have lots of questions and comments that have come through over the last week or so. And another one, Eddie, for you from Nelson8699. And he asks you, Eddie, about the Japanese team and what looks to be, the playing of a short, sharp pass at the gain line, which has been quite effective. And it reminds Nelson of sort of Mark Ella and his decision-making playing at the gain line, that flat attack that he plays. And Nelson asks you, is it possible to teach a 9 and 10 to play at the gain line, or is it just something that you know instinctively how to play in traffic?
I wish Mark Ella had a Japanese passport, mate. He'd be pretty handy. Look, for the nines, I think, nines running at the line is contingent on quick ruck ball. So if you're getting quick enough ruck ball, the nines can run. There was always that criticism of George Gregan when he stopped running, he wasn't running enough. But, George was a really good decision making, and he knew when to run. But you have to have quick ruck ball because you need the defence to be unsettled, for the 9 to run. And it's, the same principle as rugby league. You got to fast play the ball. You want your dummy half to run. In rugby, if you've got a quick ruck ball, you want your 9 to run. One of the hardest things to teach now is not the 9 running, but then the support players to be up and playing, because everyone's used to playing back in formation. So now the hardest thing to teach is the support players to hit the holes and chase the halfback and run a line off the halfback, which is a bit of a lost art at the moment. So we've been trying to do a little bit of that. The 10s taking on the line, again, most 10s have been used to playing a 1-3-3-1 where they basically become a distributor. But our young fella, Sushin, who's, doesn't play 10 for his club, as we've spoken about before, is developing a nice aptitude about taking on the line. And you've got to be brave, mate, as a 10, to take on the line, because you're going to get hit. And sometimes you can get hit late. But he's brave enough to do it. And can you teach a player to do it? Yes, but it takes time. It takes a lot of time to do it. And they got to experience a bit of failure to do it. Probably one of the things where Marcus Smith hasn't developed his game as much is that ability of him to take on the line.
Yeah. All right. So we'll come to the next couple of games, but I do want to go through some of these comments and questions. So McCulloch 0777, maybe my favourite podcast, and I'm a Kiwi. Eddie and Ewan give an incredible insight and are incredibly unbiased. Thanks. At R.O. Vogel reminded me that South Africa indeed had 1,019 caps in the squad that played against France at the weekend. A very experienced team. At Winston Wiggle, Eddie Jones and Rassie Erasmus are two coaches that always accept full accountability. Real rugby men. At GD, as a Safa, we will always love Eddie. Always welcome in the Republic. At Lee Turton, 9254, old school knowledge from the boys. I absolutely love it. P.S. Great memories of Eddie as England manager all those years of fun, and England fans loved Eddie's character and sense of humour. Gary Emery says, hi, David, another excellent balanced podcast. It's always informative to listen to the analysis and comments of Eddie and Ewan. At Sisyphus on lunch, first time watching, analysis of the England v Australia game was spot on. And at Jumping Jack, huge credit for your fantastic analysis. You clearly have a deep understanding and completely fair analysis of the game that we all love. At Wynand Van Ziel, I like this podcast as a Safa supporter. I appreciate you guys have a green and gold parrot on the podcast. Just teach him to shout Boca Bo. And Simon Thompson. Oh, this is a question, Eddie.
Is that you?
No,
is it?
no. Yeah, last week you didn't. Link's got a parrot. And last week we're sitting there recording the show, and all of a sudden the parrot's flown onto him and spent the second half of the show climbing all over Ewan. And so his name was Matey, and so he took over the show last week, and the audience had a very big reaction to him. But this was a question, it was a comment that you made about George Ford not being creative, and at Simon Thompson sort of took issue with that and said, well, he thinks actually George Ford is very creative when given the opportunity. So what would you say to that, Simon, challenging you on your description of George Ford not being a very creative player?
Well, I think when he was young, he was one of the best tens I've seen. He took the line on. He knew when to play a little bit deeper, and he had a great kicking game. When I spoke about him not being creative, I just don't think he takes the line on enough now. He tends to play deeper and still has great control of the game. But I always like to see him, as the previous question was about, a 10 that can take on the line when they see the opportunity to keep the defence going backwards, they take on the line. So it's not meant to be anything in terms of George's ability to create things. It's just about his alignment. I think he can play a little bit flatter at times.
All right, so before we resume our discussion about all of the matches that were played on the weekend, a final question here from Kurte, or Kurt Tapp, I should say. What is your ideal place for the World Cup to be held? Eddie Jones, you've been to a number of World Cups. What would you say is your favourite country to have attended and coached a team in?
Probably the best coaching experience was definitely in Australia. Coaching your own country at home is the most wonderful experience. You feel the patriotism of the country. You feel the importance of it. You're there amongst it. You're proud to represent your country, particularly at home. And, that World Cup, although we didn't win the World Cup, I thought, as a team we played nearly as well as we could have. We played some really good rugby and just got pipped at the end by a pretty good England side, that had some pretty fair players in Wilkinson, Jason Robinson, and you go through the pack, Delalio, they were Martin Johnson, they were a really good, strong team, and we took them right to the wire and just weren't good enough in the end. But, that was a great experience. And and we had a lot of fun at that World Cup. As I said, played some good rugby. Japan World Cup again, that was unique because it's not a rugby country. So, you've got Australia, which is sort of like a pseudo rugby country, isn't it? Battles with other sports. But, rugby in Japan is not a major sport. But again, at that time, the whole country was emerged in the World Cup, and it was a really good experience. But every World Cup I've been to has its moments and its time. 2 French World Cups. First one with South Africa was we travelled around a lot, moved from city to city, and it was a bit of an old school World Cup, whereas the last one was quite a serious one. You were situated in a, Mercure Hotel, and nothing against Mercure Hotels, but they were generally, the travellers' hotels in the middle of nowhere. And you didn't feel the World Cup as much, and particularly because we didn't have a World Cup, it was pretty difficult to enjoy.
Yeah, it's interesting you go back to 2003 because the discussion we had earlier in the program about the enjoyment of building a team and coaching a team, not just through the World Cup, but through that particular year, when you consider all of the challenges that you had with the Australian side, coming into the game, coming into the World Cup with some pretty heavy losses, particularly against the All Blacks. The pressure was on. The team wasn't quite there. Trying to manage the noise from the outside, trying to bring the team together on the inside, building towards the semi-final. It was a thrill just to be involved in all of that, wasn't it? And that challenge of just being able to know where were the movements that needed to take place to guide towards playing your best rugby at that sharp end of the season, because there was so much pressure on the Australian team, wasn't there, through that 2003 World Cup?
Yeah, there was, but I think when you've coached for a little while, and I was still a relatively young coach then, but you get to understand how to build a team, and you get to understand the time it's going to take to build a team. Like some teams you can build quicker, other teams it takes longer, depending, and a lot depends on your personnel. Like, it doesn't matter what you say about the value of a coach, and the value of the coach is there. It depends on the personnel, the talent, the work ethic, the chemistry of the players, of how you can build that team up. And we made a couple of just really simple changes to the team from June to the World Cup. One was to prioritise the selection of Elton Flatley at 12, because he was a very solid defensive player, and he was an exceptional goal kicker. So we wanted a 90% goal kicker because, when you get to the World Cup, it doesn't matter what rugby's played in between, it becomes much more defence focused because of the stakes at hand. So that was one thing. We prioritised fitness. We got the players super fit, and that definitely gave us an advantage. And the third thing was prioritised defence. Australia had been known as won the World Cup in 99, good defence team, but outstanding attack team. So we shifted the dial a little bit, just made those 3 changes. And, that had a significant effect. So you're always looking to find out, what can have the greatest impact in the shortest period of time. How much time have you got? And will that, if you prioritise that area, will that area give you an impact in terms of performance?
Yeah. No.
And we had a great doctor, Martin Raftery, who was a very accomplished businessman. He still is, still making money. We used to call him Shifty. And he was like absolutely outstanding in his practical advice on building a team. Not only the medical side, he was a super a doctor, but he was also good about understanding how to build a team because of his great experience with St. George, and he was a player with Cronulla, and he really helped us a lot in that period.
Yeah. It's interesting, isn't it, that the importance of the management team, the medical staff, the physio staff, everyone who's around the team to get that right so that you get everybody making that contribution in order for you to get the team to realise their full potential.
Yeah, particularly when you got people who are able to give you advice outside of their areas. Like, you need specialists in their areas, but then if you got staff who are able to make valued comments about the team structure or team chemistry at that time, they're worth their weight in gold. And then you throw in someone like Ewan McKenzie as your assistant coach. So you've got a lot of people with really intelligent, educated, informative ideas coming in. It helps you build a team.
No, very good. All right. So listen, back to the rugby. Were you able to look at the England-Fiji game? 38 points to 18, England over Fiji.
We had a split screen on. It was Australia, Italy and England-Fiji. Yeah. So I watched bits and pieces. It was a typical England-Fiji game. England played the power game early, a lot of kicking, got off to a fast start. Fiji gets a couple of chances, scores a couple of tries, and then you're thinking, well, this could be a repeat of 2 years ago. But England, they've got a good power in their team, and again, good depth in their squad. The bench they brought on, strong bench, able to finish the game off, and it was a very good win by England. They'll be pleased with that, and I think Steve's getting them in the right place. I think that's their 9th win in a row. They're starting to get some stability about their squad and starting to build some nice steps.
What have you noticed about England that you like so far over the last, the journey of these nine victories in a row? What are you seeing that is impressing you about the way Steve Borthwick's developing this England squad?
Well, they've gone back very much to their DNA. They've gone to a strong kicking game, strong defence. And the changes they made in their attack, I think they've simplified their attack. They play a lot straighter than they used to play, and they've got some good athleticism. The boy from Exeter's got great feet. He's hard to handle. And Arundel came back into the squad I saw and scored a super try from a kick chase that only he could score because he's exceptionally quick, exceptionally powerful, and he's been in the wilderness for a while. So if he can come back and add to the squad, because again, mate, I can't emphasise how important it is to have depth in your squad, and they're starting to build that.
Yeah. No, very impressive, I think, particularly the week before for mine against Australia. They were full of running. And it's going to be a great Six Nations coming up, and to see who, in fact, makes their way through. Chandler Cunningham South, I think it is, the big number 8. He's a big boy, isn't he? You worked with him in his early time with England. Did you get the opportunity to work with him? No, he was just after you, was he?
He was just coming through, mate. I'm not sure about him.
No. What aren't you sure about?
Not sure about him. He's a good front foot player. Yeah. When you got ball on the front foot, he's charging on it. And it might be a thing of his age, but, if he can develop that when the games get a bit tougher and a bit tighter, then he's going to be a good player. But, you have to develop that in your game.
Yeah. So plenty of other matches played over the weekend, but the last of the big matches, Argentina, comprehensive winners over Wales. Your opponents next week, 52 points to 28. You would have taken, I imagine, a deal of interest in that particular match.
We had quite a long travel day. We went from Dublin to Bristol and then 2 hours on the bus. I watched a fair bit of it. And Argentina got off to their usual fast start and finished the game well. In between, there was periods Wales played really well. I think Tandy's brought in his defence system that he had going well at Scotland, which is, they worked really hard to keep the ball carrier off the ground. They were physical, and their attack under the previous, temporary head coach, Sherritt, he seems like he's got them understanding how he wants to play. They play some nice layered attack. They swing well. And their catch and pass skills was pretty good. And again, they've built a bit more depth because Zamet's back in the squad, which gives them a winger with super gas.
So when you were sitting down and planning this particular tour, do you put circles around particular matches? Do you have particular expectations? Obviously, you plan for each match because every opposition is different. So when you were sitting back in Tokyo planning this tour and you've gone and done your reconnaissance and thought about it all, what are the thoughts that you have for the Japanese team based on your performances over the last 3 weeks, but this now becomes your next opportunity, not only to build the team, but to perhaps get a victory?
Well, you can do the things you're talking about when you've got a more settled team, mate. When you've got a settled team and you know the performances you're probably going to get, you can plan a bit more seriously about each game. But we're at the stage where we've just got to take each game as it comes and do our absolute best to prepare well for the games. We've just had as I said earlier, we've had a great experience playing Australia, South Africa, Ireland in 3 weeks. Now we've got 2 games against Wales and Georgia. Both are just above us in the rankings. And they're important games, but, all we've got to do now is get right for Wales, get the players in the right emotional state, get them physically ready, get a clear enough game plan so the players know what to do at the start of the game. And then, I've got every reason to think we can win the game.
Well, from a physical point of view, because that's again, for a team like Japan to have played, as you said before, harder than a World Cup. You've played Australia, you've played South Africa, you've played Ireland. Physically, how are they holding up? Because it's pressure, physical pressure that they would never have experienced previously.
Yeah, no, pretty good. As I said, the last game, against Ireland, we were competing hard for 65, and we got beaten by their bench. Their bench beat us pretty comprehensively. So we've got to find ways to increase the depth of our squad. Which the only way you can do that is through good training. So tomorrow, the guys that didn't play will do an extra 20 minutes at the start of training. They'll go to the ground early to just help build them up. And they all know there's a gap there between where they are and where they need to be. So we've just got to be rigorous and consistent about building up their capacity, not only their physical capacity, but their mental capacity to play at this level of rugby.
Yeah. Because I think that's the thing, isn't it? Is, to me, looking from a long, long way away, I can see what I believe is improvement. Yeah. And I would have thought that they will be building confidence from those last 3 weeks, and will come into this week with a lot of belief that, if a bit of the decision-making can improve, the option taking, some of those other small parts of the game where, a little bit frustrating, and sometimes, the yellow cards that come from pressure, perhaps they don't react that way, and so there's not yellow cards that you have to deal with. But anyway, we'll wait and see and look forward to a match this weekend. Now, one of the things you and Mackenzie and I were talking about on Friday, Eddie Jones, was all of the rugby that goes on around the world, and we certainly read out a huge number of games that were played at the weekend, and I have accumulated a number of the results from those games. So the All Blacks 15 defeated England A in Bath, 31 points to 14. Georgia 43, too good for the USA. Colombia 34, Mexico 25. Uruguay 26, Portugal 8. Romania 31, Canada 21. And the first of the World Cup qualifiers from that final position, Samoa 48, beat Brazil 10. Belgium 22, defeated Namibia 15. In the Rugby Europe Trophy, Poland 47 defeated Denmark 6. Czechia 55 defeated Croatia 33. And in the Rugby Europe Conference, Andorra 21 defeated Israel 10. And Austria 62 defeated Slovakia 3. And I do know that the Argentinian 15 defeated Bristol. But I didn't catch the result, Eddie Jones, of Ireland A and Spain. Did you see the end of that to see who won?
Well, they were well ahead. Those 33 to not much.
Right.
Not much at all. But I watched the USA Georgia game. I watched most of that, and USA gave a good account of themselves. In fact, I think they led 21-0 at one stage. But Georgia had a team missing their top 14 players because most of them were playing this weekend. On that, I think Will Skelton's playing this week for the Wallabies because I think La Rochelle had a game against Toulon yesterday. I think he was encouraged to play that game, and I think he'll play on the weekend against Ireland. I know Ireland were expecting him to play.
Yeah. Well, and as you say, interesting to see whether or not James...
Which will be good news for the Aussies.
Yeah, and whether or not James O'Connor returns as well. But it's a wonderful sweep of the game, isn't it? When you can read out all of those results, that all of that happened over the weekend, mainly in Europe. So there was so much rugby played, and that the game is played in so many different countries. And this, trying to bring some attention to all of these games of rugby, to align the sport, to bring more, as I say, visibility and awareness of the fact that the game is played in so many different countries, and there are so many competitions available for people to go and enjoy, to watch, and indeed for the players to play. So, great to see all of those results. And I think this weekend in Europe, it'll be no different. There'll be a lot more rugby played again this weekend. And certainly a lot to look forward to. So, Eddie Jones, you've been very kind. We've kept you up late. Unfortunately, Ewan Mackenzie hasn't been dealing with a family emergency, hasn't been able to join with us. He will join us later in the week. But, Eddie, thank you so much for staying up late in the UK. We've got to get you to bed so you can get up first thing in the morning. So a big thanks to you for joining us for the review program of a big weekend of rugby in Europe. And to you, the audience, a big thanks, as always, for your ongoing support, whether you're engaging on Substack, through social media, YouTube, Apple, Spotify, podcasts, whichever way that you're doing. Thank you so much. And thank you for the comments and the questions, because, again, we do believe that certainly strengthens the program. So please keep those coming in the days and weeks and months ahead. We certainly enjoy and we believe that makes the program a lot stronger for that. So we will be back later in the week with another big preview of the November rugby. But for the moment, people, please be kind to each other. My name is David Pembroke, and it's bye for now.